VOWR800.
Hello and welcome to Going Strong, the program that celebrates the unique and vibrant culture of Newfoundland and Labrador, this place we call home. My name is Deborah Collins, and each week I chat with someone who makes a valuable contribution to that culture, who plants it firmly in the hearts and minds of others and keeps it going strong. My guest today checks all those boxes. He's been a member of many of the province's best-known traditional bands, including Figgy Duff, the Wonderful Grand Band, the Plankerdown Band, and the Irish Descendants. His record label, Pigeon Inlet Productions, has produced more than 30 albums, and he's helped revive traditional Newfoundland dance, storytelling, and the art of recitation. He and his fiddle have blazed a trail on behalf of this province around the world. No surprise that this year he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Newfoundland and Labrador Folk Arts Society. Hello, Kelly Russell.
Hello, Deborah Collins.
Thank you for dropping by.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, congratulations on the award, Lifetime Achievement. How does it feel to hear those words? Is it like a pinnacle or just another launching pad along the way?
Well, the nice thing about getting a Lifetime Achievement Award is getting it while you're still alive. Because oftentimes, that type of award is given to someone, after they're gone. So that's the first thing I'll say about it. It's great to be still alive, to enjoy the fact that that was bestowed upon me this year.
Oh, and you're clearly still achieving, obviously. You have a new solo show on this week at the Barbara Barrett Theatre at the Arts and Culture Centre. It's called Who Knit Ya? Mm-hmm. It's a great old Newfoundland expression. So tell me about the title and the show.
Well, my director, Fabian O'Keefe, we're working together on this show. It was Fabian who approached me, and we're doing a school tour, actually, and taking this out, but a more interactive with the students version of it. So this is the entertaining version, shall we say? And it was Fabian who came up with the title, Who Knit Ya? And he thought it was appropriate for me in exploring back through particularly the early days of my career, starting out with Figgy Duff and Wonderful Grand Band, and so it's kind of not just simply asking who were your parents, where did you come from, but who are the people that influenced you, that have that sort of changed the path that your career took. So I examine those early influences on my own career.
And we'll hear some stories, and you play a variety of instruments: mandolin, concertina, piano. But you're most closely identified with the fiddle, and You're coming on 50 years playing the fiddle. Most people can't picture you without that fiddle in your hand. And what was it about the fiddle that resonated so deeply with you?
It's really hard to really say exactly what that was, but the closest I can come is to describe to you when it was that, because I was intent on being a musician all my life. Like back when I was 14, 15, I had an electric guitar. I had a Fender Telecaster, and I was determined I was going to be not just a musician, but I was going to be a rock musician. Yes. I was going to be a lead guitar player, right? Yeah. So, I don't know. There was a lot of competition, and I wasn't really that good on the guitar. And it was I met a new group of friends in what I call up around Mon. I didn't actually go to Mon, as Greg Toomey used to say on 22 Minutes. I went up around Mon, and I got in with a group of friends there, and I heard new music that I'd never heard before. English folk rock, bands like Fairport Convention, Steel Eye Span, and they were combining traditional music, old ballads and fiddle tunes, that sort of thing, but with a rock band accompaniment. So it was a fusion of folk and rock. And that's what really turned me on to the fiddle. I thought, wow, this is something different. Not so much competition, right, with playing the fiddle. I traded in the guitar and took up mandolin and then fiddle.
And the rest is history.
And on I went from there.
And of course, you caught the torch from some of the province's older iconic musicians, especially fiddlers Rufus Ginchard, Emile Benoit, who really became your mentors.
Yes.
Is there any way to sum up or quantify what these two men gave you?
Well, I'm glad you used the expression about passing the torch, because that's how I view it as well, It's something that was there to be done, and I was there in a position to do it. So in a sense, I really had no choice. Not that I would have turned it down, but both with Rufus Kinshard and with Emile Benoit, they were older players. And I recognized right away as a younger player myself that, well, my goodness, no one in their families, like Rufus had all these children, grandchildren, great-grand, no one was learning to play his music. So it was at risk of disappearing when he died. So I recognized pretty quickly that, someone had to take this up, or as you said, had to accept the torch. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So that's what I did.
What do you think, and I mean, I know it's hard to speak for them, but you did spend a lot of time with them. What do you think it meant to them to have you there, so keen, so eager to accept and to learn from them? What do you think it meant to them?
I think that, it was a mutual relationship. I was getting music that, I'll be bold and say, no other fiddle player in the world had the kind of music that I was getting from Rufus and from Emile. So that gave me the opportunity to stand out and be unique amongst fiddlers. Yes, I could play Irish tunes and Scottish tunes, but I had this repertoire of different tunes, so that if I went to Ireland and played these tunes, they would, this is not just another Irish player or a wannabe Irish player. This guy's got material that's different, both in its melodic content and in its style of playing. But for them, to get back to your question, I think that they recognized right away that their music would live on. And especially, when they saw me not only playing it and recording it with bands, but I remember when Rufus first saw me writing out the music in notation, he was like, oh my, he said, how do you do that? I said, well, I learned it, my mother taught me piano. And I said, people who know how to read music, Rufus, can just look at this paper and play your tunes. So he thought that was wonderful.
So he knew then that it would be preserved.
He knew the music would live on, absolutely, yeah.
Something I've always been curious about, Emile always called it his violin.
Yes.
But most in Newfoundland, with regard to traditional music, call it the fiddle. Yeah. Is there a physical difference between a violin and a fiddle, or is it just how it's played?
Yeah. That's the most frequently asked question. And I love the question, because people really are curious about it. And I think it's the fact that the instrument has such a diverse potential musically. You can play almost any kind of music on it. I mean, the fiddle is in country music, it's in classical music, it's in jazz, it's in folk, it's everywhere, right? Such an expressive and versatile instrument. So the answer to the question, the real answer to it, is that no, there is no difference. The fiddle and the violin are the exact same instrument. It's just a different name. Generally, fiddle is used for, in folk music, and violin for classical, although, as you quite correctly point out, Emile always called it his violin.
He did.
That's
right, yeah. Well, we're going to hear one of your tunes now, and hear you playing a polka and a jig, the heel and toe polka and Paddy's jig, and it's from Figgy Duff's Silver Reunion album. Let's have a listen. And that was Heel and Toe Polka and Patty's Jig by my guest today on Going Strong, Newfoundland fiddler, musician, storyteller, Kelly Russell. And speaking of storytelling, of course, you play a lot of instruments, but you also have a love for traditional storytelling and recitation. And you've helped to revive it here in the province. You didn't have to go very far for inspiration when it came to that. I would think you were literally born into the home of acclaimed storyteller and playwright Ted Russell, your father.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I can remember as a boy, I can picture Dad now sitting down. He had one of these fold-up card tables, and he would sit down at the card table with his paper. He would write. There was no typewriter or, of course, no computers back in those days, and he would write the stories out longhand. And a couple of samples I have of Dad's handwritten stories. There's no editing done on it whatsoever. He didn't even scratch out a word, and it's written in pen. He just sat down and wrote out the story longhand, and then went down to CBC Radio the next day or the day after, whenever it was due, and he would go down and tell that story on the radio. And next week, then he'd do another one. And so on. He did that for 8 years.
The story was so clear in his head.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you tell stories now. It's part of the current show that you're doing.
Yes.
Did you always have a love for telling stories yourself, or was that something that you developed as time went on?
I'm going to give you the humorous answer. In Newfoundland, years ago, when people would be sitting around entertaining themselves at a time or whatever, if you didn't play an instrument, well, you were expected to at least be able to sing a song. And if you couldn't do either one of those things, well, tell a story. You had to contribute something.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
So I've never been a great singer. So there's your answer.
But you can tell a story. Yeah.
So I got into storytelling. When I started doing it, of course, it was influenced by my dad. And the first story that I ever told, back in the Figgy Duff days, actually, in the 70s, many Figgy Duff shows, if they weren't in a bar situation, if they were more of a concert performance, I would contribute, besides playing fiddle and mandolin with the band, I would often do the smoke room on the Kyle. So I've been doing it since the mid-70s, and I still do it today. And Deborah, I enjoy it just as much now as I did then. It's such a fabulous piece.
Yeah. And people who attend your show this week, who knit you at the Arts and Culture Centre, will hear some of those stories and recitations.
Yes, they will hear Smoke Room on the Kyle, and another story of my dad's, which I have a personal connection to. Dad wrote one years ago, back when I was just a baby, and it's a story about what I was told about this. Mom told me this, that Dad was stuck for an idea for a story, and he had to have one. Like I was telling you, he did one a week. So this 1 week he had, I guess you call it writer's block. So he didn't have any idea for a story. And he mentioned this to a friend who said, well, Ted, I don't know, what were you doing last night? And Dad said, I was babysitting. And light bulb moment, right? And so he came up with this story, which I tell in the show. And I'm not going to deliver a spoiler here. You'll have to come to the show to hear it. That's right, But it's... I was the baby that all this happened to in the story, you see, with the piece of fat pork. And, anyway, yeah.
He wrote what he knew. He wrote from his own experience.
He certainly did.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed over many years of interviewing people in the arts and entertainment fields and other fields as well, because
it's a lot of years, Deborah.
It's a lot of years,
I know. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. But I noticed that performance seems to come naturally to people from this province. I remember interviewing a 7-year-old girl in Harbour Breton. She was an accordion player who entertained quite large audiences with her father. And I remember in the middle of the interview, set up in her living room with the big old camera at that time, and asking her what made her more nervous, playing in front of a large audience or doing a TV interview. And she looked at me, kind of sat back and these wise 7-year-old eyes, and she was almost surprised at the question, and she said, "Nar one of it," she said. And then she went on to say, "I ain't got no nervous in me." And I thought, you and countless others in this province. What is it, do you think, that gives such a high proportion, I think a disproportionate number of people, in this province, such ease on a stage and in front of an audience, just to hold an audience in the palm of their hand?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and you're right. So many people are comfortable with being on a stage and performing like that. Goodness, we love to entertain other people, And Newfoundlanders love to laugh and enjoy themselves. And I think that's a large part of it. If I can sit here in a conversation and I can say something that makes you laugh, then that's gratifying to me, right? If I can do it and make 100 people laugh, well, so much the better.
Exponentially better, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So, I have to go up on the stage to do that? Fine. When do I go? I think we're natural. We love to entertain each other in this kind of informal manner. And if we're put in a formal situation to do it, so much the better. Yeah.
And of course, you took your musical traditional messages around the world. I remember interviewing you a good many years ago. You were traveling a lot at the time. And I asked you if you'd ever move away, base yourself in one of these other places. And you answered with an emphatic no. And as I recall, as much as you love to play in other places, you always needed to come back here for inspiration, replenishment. Yes. You actually called Newfoundland the source.
The source.
What did you mean by that?
Well, it's, our Newfoundland culture is such a deep well of material. I mean, there's not hundreds of songs, there's thousands of songs, the newly written ones plus the old ballads and stuff that goes way back. Fiddle tunes, I've come to realize there's no end to them. There is not a finite amount of fiddle music. It just, like, when you think you've heard them all, here's another one. And then somebody composes one. It's a deep, deep well of material to draw from. And for the artist that decides to go that route and perform material that comes from that well, the resource is huge. And yes, I'm not going to find that material anywhere else. Newfoundland is where I'm going to find it. And it's not so much geographical, like being in Newfoundland, but it's from Newfoundlanders. That is the source of it. And I remember saying that to you in the interview.
It never left me. And very briefly, we're going to hear another song now in just a moment. You've received multiple awards, the Order of Canada, an honorary doctorate from Memorial University. Briefly, what do you think that says about the official, if you will, the formal importance placed on our musical culture?
Well, the honorary doctorate, and a lot of other artists have received it. I mean, musicians, actors, writers, so many people. I think it's wonderful that the university recognizes that research and education and knowledge, it's not all necessarily academic, that there's other sources of this stuff. And some of these sources are people who are not actually educated themselves. Emile Benoit didn't have high school education. Most of these people of that generation, they went to school, but only until they were old enough to go out and boat with their fathers and fish. And then it was, what was more important? It was more important to make a living.
But they taught us a lot and gave us a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you take Emile Benoit, he wanted to be a doctor. He was in Black Duck Brook, he was the local doctor, quote unquote. Yes. If you needed, any kind of medical assistance, Emile was the go-to person. So when he was given his doctorate at MUN, his comment was, well, finally they recognized me for being a doctor.
What I've known all along. Yeah. Well, we're going to hear another song from your WGB days, wonderful grand band, and this one is called The Budgels Jigs. And that was The Budgel's Jigs by Kelly Russell, Newfoundland fiddler, storyteller, music producer, and owner of his own record label, Pigeon Inlet Productions. Kelly, you've produced more than 30 full-length albums, your own music, many others of the province's musicians. Quite a contribution, when you think about it, to the canon of Newfoundland and Labrador music. What were you aiming for with these albums and the selection of musicians? What do you think will be their enduring legacy?
I think I realized, it was after recording that album that we just heard a track from. That's the first Wonderful Grand Band album. That was my first experience making a record. And I came out of that completely hooked on it. I just loved it. And right away, my head started filling up with ideas of, just other albums that could be made. Look at all these great musicians we've got and singers and storytellers. I mean, EMI Records or Sony Music or Warner Music, they're not coming down here looking for that kind of music. If this is going to be recorded, we've got to do it ourselves. So that I think it was that realization that led me to start up a company and then start making records of some of the fabulous music that we've got here in Newfoundland. So
one of my favorite of all times is All the Best. And I think that was perhaps one of the first compilation discs of a variety of musicians?
It was, if you want to give it a first for anything, it was the first CD. It came out just when CDs were coming on into the market and LPs were on the way out, as were cassette tapes. Now, interestingly, the LPs have come back. I don't think we'll see the cassette tapes back.
No, maybe not.
But so this was 1988, and All the Best was a concept of mine to do an album of various artists, but with a common theme, all to do with music either about or in somehow connected with St. John's. So all the pieces, like John White's Signal
That's
Hill,
right, of course, and
the list goes on. Yeah.
And you've also published a 2-volume collection of more than 500 fiddle tunes. I mean, extraordinary resource. That with the albums that you produce, and a couple of reasons I'm thinking you received an award from the Provincial Historical Commemorations group with the designation of Tradition Bearer. And that really jumped out at me, that phrase. And I think for a Newfoundlander who's loved, lived, and recorded our culture all your life, that's a pretty special title, I would think, Tradition Bearer.
Yeah, I like that one too. It harkens back to what we were talking about earlier about passing the torch. I think that was the idea behind this particular commemoration. It was not so much for, your musical ability or anything like that, but more to the fact that you've become part of that chain, that continuum, exactly. That, you've learned this music from these older folks. Not only that you've taken on this music yourself, but then what comes after that? Well, you have to pass it on, right? So I've done a lot of music teaching over the years. Some notable musicians that I taught way back in the day.
Including your own daughters?
Yes, yeah. For example, Paddy Moran, who has played with Irish Descendants, with the Punters. He's made a real solid career being a fiddle player. Shani Gannock he's played with as well. My goodness, I taught him. So there's a real feeling of satisfaction to know that I was able to be the link between musicians like Rufus Ginchard and Emile Benoit. I was around at the right time. I mean, Paddy Moran would have never had the opportunity as a teenager or a young adult to learn from them because they were gone by that time. But I was able to get their music and then pass it on to him. And, hopefully he's Paddy.
If you're listening.
Pass that on to someone else now. Don't keep it for yourself.
I think you're pretty confident it's in good hands.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Very much so. I think generally our Newfoundland cultural treasures, our music and our stories and songs and, that can encompass many other things too, to do with things that are rooted in our unique Newfoundland culture. I think they're all in good hands, and we are no longer in any danger of losing anything that we had. Not in my opinion, anyway. That's a debatable point, perhaps for some, but I think it's in great hands. Yeah.
Well, you've certainly done and continue to do your part, to keep our culture strong, and thank you for that. But what is it that keeps Kelly Russell going strong?
Now, there's a question. There's a question. I run into people sometimes, someone I haven't seen in a while, and they say, "So he's still playing the fiddle?" And I kind of look at him like, What do you mean? Am I still playing? Of course I'm still playing the fiddle. Musicians don't retire, you know? I guess the only way that I would stop playing music was if I couldn't play it anymore. If I had some physical disability or something that caused me to no longer be able to play. But every musician I know, there's no point at which they've said, okay, you know, I'm this many years old now, or I've done this for this many years, time to hang it up and do something else. It's too late to retrain me. That's another response that I sometimes give people. You know, you can't retrain me now. I've been doing this for so long. It's what I know how to do.
It's a passion.
And yes, that is the final point there. Really, it is a passion. It's something that I love doing, and whenever I play tunes from Rufus or Emil or any of the other many fiddlers that I've learned music from, I remember them when I play it. And just knowing that, you know, this is their music and it's been kept alive and it's celebrating who we are as a people. We have things that make us different from anyone else in the country and anyone else in the world, for that matter. And it's these things that are such treasures for us.
Yeah. And we should never forget who knit us.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's important advice for us all, but of course also the name of Kelly Russell's one-man show playing this week at the Barbara Barrett Theatre at the Arts and Culture Centre in St. John's. Check it out. Tickets still available. Thank you, Kelly, for coming in.
Thank you, and thanks so much for the promotion for the show. I hope people come out and see it, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it if you do.
Wonderful. Well, that is Going Strong for this week. My name is Deborah Collins, inviting you to join us again next Tuesday evening at 7:30, right here on VOWR.